Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name's Danielle and today's video is so exciting because it is my favorite top 10 sci-fi and fantasy books of all time so far. I've never done this type of video before. I've never actually even curated like a list for myself personally, but I figured what a better time to do it than the second round of Wonderthon. If you are unfamiliar, Wonderthon is an amazing readathon created by my booktube bestie, Lizzie, over at Lizzie's Literary Life. It's very much inspired by Sid Meier's Civilization, where there are different cities that are working toward advancing their civilizations. There are 4 teams altogether, hosted by myself, Ruby over at Ruby Red, Bailey over at Is Bailey Reading, and Martine at Just Martine. We each have taken on a city in Italy that we'll be working toward advancing, and I, myself, will be representing Florence, and our genre is going to be sci-fi and fantasy. So if any of these titles call out to you and inspire you to join my team, the winning team, I will leave the link down below. It's going to take place toward the end of June. It's going to be altogether 2 weeks and 3 weekends from the 15th through I think the 30th or the 31st. So this video is kind of just in hopes to maybe entice some of you to join my team. See if there's any titles that you're like, oh, I totally want to read that. What a better time, because as I said, I'm representing Florence and our genre, our team genre is sci-fi and fantasy. Anyway, without further ado, I'm gonna get started because I would be embarrassed to tell you how many times I've filmed that intro. And I finally have one that I think I'm gonna stick with, so I'm gonna keep moving it along. I am gonna start with like the smallest little disclaimer real quick. There were a lot of books that almost made this list that I determined leaned more into subgenres a little too much that I wanted to, it kind of just helped me like shave it down a little more. Specifically, paranormal romance and dystopian. Those were kind of the stories that I found myself struggling with where to put them on this list. So I just kind of decided, you know, I'm going to keep it as pure as I can to like pure sci-fi fantasy and stick with that. So if you don't see certain books like my fave Twilight, there's a reason. That lives on its own list of amazing books, but not this list. So my 10th favorite sci-fi fantasy of all time is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I think that this is one of those books that should be on everybody's top sci-fi list. It is a classic novel. This follows a scientist named Victor Frankenstein who brings to life a creature who has never lived before. He calls him a monster, but it really becomes a story of who is the bigger monster, the creator or the creation. I think this story has so much depth to it that really, I mean, it's a classic. It's referenced in so many things, but it goes deeper than just the scary, goofy monster. Like, it is a really in-depth story of a creature being abandoned by their father and by their creator, and it questions a lot about God and what makes a living thing a person, and I just thought it was really beautiful. I've read it a couple times now in high school and then in undergraduate, and I will just continue to rave about it. I think it's just a wonderful story. A lot of scholars and researchers consider it to be the epitome, like the creation of the sci-fi genre, and I love giving it that credit, especially because it's written by Mary Shelley, and I just love a strong female author who started a whole new trend. If you've never picked it up, I highly recommend doing so. You can find copies pretty much anywhere for very reasonable prices, or even free online, or you know, through your library, and I just think that it's one of those classics that reads pretty easily. It's not too difficult to get through, and it's just such a wonderful piece of feminist moral messaging. And yes, I do think there are a lot of feminist readings that can be done about this book. My 9th favorite sci-fi and fantasy of all time. I'm not gonna say that every time. This is a book that I had a harder time placing on the list. Like, there were kind of moments where I wasn't sure if it should go on. It's one that I just kind of couldn't figure out where to put it on my list, but I really do think that it deserves a little more hype than it gets. I think that it is a very fun sci-fi time fish out of water story, and that is Una Out of Order by Margarita Montemor. This story is so good. I really wish I saw more people picking it up. I literally listened to this from the library and then immediately had to go purchase my own copy. She does have a newer novel that came out not too long ago called Acts of Violet that I want to get to eventually. I think that's more of a mystery, and this is definitely a sci-fi. This features a woman who, when it reaches her, I believe, 21st birthday? No, it's her 19th. So the minute she turns 19, she wakes up in a totally different year of her life. And she discovers that her experience as a person in the world will be taking her through different years in her life totally out of order. So she'll start at 19, and then she'll go to like 53, and then 24, and then 80, and it just kind of follows her trying to enjoy that year of her life and pick up the pieces of what she doesn't know is going on, while also dealing with the consequences of what different choices she made in different years. And I just think it's so emotionally impactful, really well done. I just thought it was great. I gave it 5 stars. It definitely leans more on the lower end of sci-fi. There's not really like a time machine or anything like that. It just is sort of that slipping in time and weaving in and out of different areas of her life, which I think is great for like if you're, you know, newer to the fantasy sci-fi world and want to dip your toes in, but don't maybe want to deal with the scientific explanations of things. But yeah, I highly recommend you pick this up. Like I said, it really hit me emotionally. I cannot wait to read it again sometime. Had to pick up a copy immediately. The cover's really fun. I just thought it was really enjoyable and just changed my life. The 8th book that I have for you is actually Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. Kindred follows a young black woman, I believe around the 70s it takes place, and she is thrust back to the 1800s, where she is placed specifically on a plantation, and slavery is still very much legal and very much popularized in the South where she ends up, and she finds herself saving the life of this young boy. And it turns out to be, no spoilers, but it turns out to be the young white son of a plantation-owning family. And you follow her trying to save herself, find out where this boy are connected. It flashes back and forth to the future where she has a partner who is searching for her, while she's terrified to go back in the past, but also feels this connection that she needs to save the boy, maybe to save herself. It is just a very eye-opening novel that, it was my first Octavia E. Butler that I ever read, and I will definitely be continuing to pick up her stories. I think if you haven't picked up any of hers, I highly, highly recommend it. The prose are absolutely gorgeous. It's not too long at all if you want something that you can read pretty quickly. I just don't recommend you go into it with a faint of heart. It doesn't get necessarily gruesome, but there are moments that are definitely more unbearable than other ones. There's also a newer graphic adaptation of this that I think was actually pretty well done too. I read it not too long ago. It was really great, like very amazing to see it depicted in art otherwise than just prose, and so I definitely recommend that. And to take a little bit of a pivot to so we have had like Frankenstein and Kindred, like some literary like achievements. This I would not say is like the most gonna blow your socks out of the water, but boy oh boy do I love Inuyasha. I'm not gonna say it's bad. Like, I am not saying whatsoever that the writing is lackluster or anything. It just is like, it's a different kind of read. You know what I mean? Inuyasha is by Rumiko Takahashi. I have an Inuyasha tattoo. That's how much this series means to me. It follows a young 16-year-old girl who falls down her family's like ancient ancestral well, and she wakes up in feudal Japan where she discovers there is a dog demon. Oh, I love him so much, Inuyasha. I'm like literally blushing thinking about him. So she wakes up and she discovers that there is this demon who is basically nailed to a tree by this arrow. Kagome, being the brilliant girly that she is, decides, I'm gonna release this guy, not having any context of what's going on. It's such a beautiful story because their dynamic is absolutely hilarious. He's very much an I hate everyone but you, but also I kind of hate you because I'm refusing to acknowledge that I love you kind of story. She is such a strong character. Kagome is one of the best young female characters I've ever watched. She just really is very independent. She's so strong. She is intelligent in terms of like emotional intelligence, even when her and Inuyasha are bickering back and forth. But then you also have this really intriguing story of good versus evil, where Inuyasha, even within himself, is battling between being a half demon and being immortal, and wanting these jewel shards to make himself entirely demon, but then also not really sure if that is how he wants to live, because he realizes like he values his humanity. There's an amazing gang of characters that are just so freaking funny and oftentimes inappropriate, but I love them anyway. I used to remember staying up until like 2 a.m. watching it on Cartoon Network late at night. So definitely recommend if you've never given it a shot. It's just a wonderful feudal Japan fantasy romance. My sixth favorite sci-fi fantasy of all time is another fantasy, and that is going to be Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. I think that there's such a complicated history to this series, and a lot of us have very complicated feelings toward it. Specifically, like, I'm not even going to get into the show. I don't, that's a whole video in and of itself of just my pain. But the books themselves, these are so instrumental into me getting into fantasy. I read them back when the first season was coming out. I had to like devour them. I remember getting my first copy. It was like 50 cents from the library. It was so battered, but I loved it to death until the pages fell apart. It was a series that brought me and my family closer together. We would watch every single week. My best friend Sydney and I, we literally bonded over Game of Thrones when it was coming out. So it's just a very, very special series to me. If you're not sure what it's about, it's just a very high fantasy, intense story. Players are trying to achieve the Iron Throne. They are trying to rule over the Seven Kingdoms. There's a great deal of betrayal and lies and deceit and love. It's just a very grand tale overall. I don't feel like I need to praise it or give you that much of a description. I feel like this is such a well-loved series and well-hated. Like I said, it's a very complex story. There's 5 now. We're still waiting for the last 2. I don't know if this book will remain on my top 10 of all time. That's why I did joke, like, for now, because, I mean, I got a lot of books to read in my life. But I'm going to continue to appreciate it for what it's brought me and my family and my friends and the joy it brought me for so many years. And I'm just going to be optimistic that George R.R. Martin will give us the finale that he wants, but that we've really wanted for so long, for those of us who are big fans that were disappointed. So I keep them now in a very special place in my heart. I do hope to reread them. I definitely want to see, like, do they hold up? I've only ever read them once. And then my partner's, like, never seen it, so I would really love to watch that as well with him. Now it's getting spicy. Now we're getting into the top 5. This is very exciting. My 5th favorite sci-fi fantasy of all time is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. Look at those tabs. There's also Muse of Nightmares is the sequel, but look at those tabs. Look at those, baby. So I've read Strange the Dreamer a couple of times now. Muse of Nightmares, I am including it as a series, but I will say Muse of Nightmares did not impress me as much as the first book did. But just know that, like, in my heart, that's also included. Wow, where to even begin with this book? Strange the Dreamer follows a young orphan named Laszlo Strange who has always just felt like there's something different about him, and he is a librarian and a scholar who just really struggles to... He just doesn't feel like he is where he's meant to be, and so he is fascinated by this lost city of Weep, where 200 years ago, this city was totally cut off from the rest of civilization. There's no information of, like, what happened, where it went. Even the name of the city, Weep, is actually just a term that is used to describe it, but the actual name of the city has been long forgotten. But Laszlo dreams of traveling to this land and discovering its secrets and the mysteries of what happened there. There's also some other perspectives you get that are really, really fascinating. I cry so hard every time I read this novel. It is just such a grand work of art. I actually genuinely, like, talking about it now, I think I'm going to reread it for Wonderthon. I just think that it is really a book you cannot go wrong on, and if you have not had the pleasure of enjoying this novel, and it's only a duology, which is wonderful. It's a very easy story to consume. I really, really recommend you pick it up. The next book I have for you, so number 4, is actually like a brand new addition to the list, and that is going to be Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. Wow, so I am reading this with a lot of my besties here, and we started with the Assassin's Apprentice series, and I read it, and I enjoyed it for sure the first half, and then the last half I really didn't enjoy, and then I picked up Ship of Magic, and I went, oh, I think I'm a pirate girly. I'm so obsessed with this. I think I want to watch Pirates of the Caribbean now. But this is just a beautiful story with many, many different perspectives, and they culminate in such a wonderful and engaging way. It has to do with these giant ships that have their own sentience and their own existence, and the families that preside over them and ride them in the ocean and what they do with their powers, and it's just so good. It was so good. I read this like 1,000, maybe 1,200 page book in like 5 days. I literally just devoured it. It was just, I did nothing but think about reading it. So I have not finished the series yet. I look forward to doing so, but if you have not picked up Ship of Magic, or if you read her first series and were like, I don't know if I'm gonna read it, please give it a shot. I thought it was so good, and it made me learn that like I am an ocean girly. I will not touch the ocean. I actually kind of hate touching the ocean, but boy oh boy will I read about it. Now we're in the top 3, and I can't believe we're here. So my third favorite fantasy series of all time is The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. I am including all of them in this discussion, but I'm just going to hold book 1 right now. I have tabbed the crap out of them all right now. I am currently reading all of Brandon Sanderson's Cosmereverse with my friend Erin. We're going through them. So there are a lot of his that I haven't gotten to, so I'm sure he will make an appearance on this list again one day. But for now, this being the first era that I have enjoyed, it is just one of the most amazing stories, and where it surprisingly really has such a strength is in the characters, and Vin in particular. She's the main character of the story. God, seeing her grow through the stories and seeing her come into her own skin and the sacrifices and accomplishments she makes, it's just so amazing. Final Empire follows a society that has been ruled by the Lord Ruler for a very, very long time, like literally like centuries. Well, how long is a century? A century? A century. That's 1,000, right? Or is that 100? For 1,000 years, he's ruled over, and he is like this cruel dictator type figure. And there is a cast of characters who decide that they are going to attempt to overthrow the empire. And what I love about it is what goes wrong and what goes well. Like, it's just, you don't really expect the things that are going to happen. It's a in general, very full of unexpected surprises. The writing was great. I remember reading the first one and be like, okay, like a solid, I think like 4-star or whatever. And then by the time I was done with the series, I was gasping, I was crying. As a whole, it is a 5-star series. I literally cannot wait to read more of his. I am almost done with the second era. Not loving it as much as the first one. I am still enjoying it, but I am very excited to get to his Words of Radiance series and those books as well. As of what I've read right now, The Final Empire is definitely my third favorite fantasy series of all time. My second favorite sci-fi fantasy book of all time is a sci-fi that is very short. It's a novella, and I don't have it with me anymore because I actually sent it to my professor. So when I was an undergrad, there was a class I took that was about science fiction literature, and I wanted to send this to him because I just really thought he should read it, really thought it should be part of the curriculum. And now that I've sent it to him, the price of the book has literally quadrupled. Just to get a copy of it has quadrupled. But that is To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. This is just an absolute stunning novella that follows this small cast of characters are exploring the universe and trying to establish some sort of idea of what's going on in the world. But what I love most about it is the care and the crafting that goes into them making sure they don't affect these worlds they're going to as much as they can. They're very intent on not leaving an imprint, not changing the lives that are there, not affecting the creatures that are there. But then it's also the exploring of different worlds and the overall way that the story concludes at the end. It just was really stunning for such a short story. It surpasses queer identities. It has people that are in queer relationships. It just tackles so many different topics, but none of which feel too focused on or under focused on, if that makes any sense. She just really crafted this beautiful novella that I think if it would have been longer, it would have been a disservice to it, and I love it. I really, really recommend you pick it up if you have not yet. Again, a super great one for this readathon since it's going to be shorter. But I would just be prepared. It's a bit of an emotional one. There are scenes from this book that I have just never stopped thinking about since I read it for the first time. Like I said, I think it's a wonderful discussion book. I think if you have a sci-fi book club, this would be a really great book to read and talk together. So that is why it is my second favorite sci-fi of all time. And then finally, we're here. But my favorite sci-fi fantasy of all time, and I have stuck by this book for quite a while, is The Sword of Kagan by M.L. Wang. This is the copy that I've read a couple times, but this is my beautiful Wraithmark edition that I got. It is, I'm just not exaggerating. First of all, it's the most beautiful book I own. But it is just the most impactful story for me. I absolutely love this book. I usually, if like a friend says they haven't read it, you can literally convince me to order it for you immediately so you will read it. I think it's just fantastic. It is so well written. I did buddy read it with Lizzie actually not too long ago, and she had some pretty valid criticisms that I think stand. Like, I don't think that it's without fault, but in general, the way I describe this is why it impacted me so much is I've said that it basically made me feel an emotion that I've never felt before, and that I don't, in my life experiences, do not think I will ever feel. But the way that Emma Wang the way that she was able to connect to me as someone who won't feel that was phenomenal. The writing emotionally was so impactful to me. The Sword of Kagan follows two perspectives, one of which is a young son and then his mother, who live on the Kaganese Empire, and they are kind of in like the mountain regions of a feudal Asian land. Socially and politically, they are in charge of protecting the land. Like, that's what for generations they've been basically fed to believe. And then one day the young son starts questioning this. He meets a new boy to the area who starts making him question what he's been told his whole life. Meanwhile, his mother, who is basically serves as like an obedient housewife now, she was, when she was younger, a very strong street fighter back in like a different city. So she has explored the world. She knows that there's more to what her people are being told, but it is not her role to say anything about that. She is just to produce heirs and take care of the family. But she never quite sheds that past life, and through circumstances, there may be reasons that she is forced to confront that past and maybe even lean into it once more when there are threats looming to their home. Overall, just the dual perspective of the two characters, the way you see them learn and grow, and the character development is just unreal. It is really... I cried so hard just feeling so much for these characters, and I just really recommend, if you've not picked this up, you're doing a disservice to yourself. It is available, I believe, on Kindle Unlimited still. I know Emma Wang's newest novel just released. I believe it was like Bloodhaven, something like that. I heard that, honestly, people who love this book say that that's even better. So I can't wait to pick that one up. I just have not ordered it quite yet. This is probably my favorite book that I own. This is just my prized possession, and I cannot express to you, if you have not read this book, how highly I think you should pick this up. The other fun part is that it is a standalone as well. So there are like hints to a greater world, but it's not the commitment of a 10-book series. It is a beautiful story that you can consume and be changed by, and then revisit as you'd like. Yeah, thanks so much for being here. I hope that I inspired you to pick up some more sci-fi and fantasy books. I've never curated a list like this, like I said, so I'm sure things will change as I grow, and maybe I'll revisit this one day. But I wanted to tempt you with some of these favorites, and hopefully you'll join Team Florence. Like I said, I'll leave all the information down below for Wonderthon. Please don't forget to subscribe and like this video if you want to see more from me. And I'll see you in the next one.